The great continental plates are locked in a geological ballet, a slow-motion separation that will take millions of years to complete. The land masses we know are still fused, their divorce proceedings measured in millimeters per year. Between them, the Atlantic is not yet an ocean, but a shallow saline fissure, a nascent scar upon the face of the planet. The air itself is different, a thick, warm, and humid medium, almost tropical in its embrace. Oxygen is scarcer than in our own time, but the atmosphere is saturated with carbon dioxide, wrapping the world in a profound and lasting greenhouse warmth.
This is not a speculative future. This is a portrait of Earth 155 million years ago. This is the Late Jurassic. It is a world alien to our eyes, a planet of unfamiliar coastlines and strange flora. Yet it is the very crucible in which our own story was forged. Without this time, without the colossal creatures that strode across its sun-scorched plains and waded through its ephemeral rivers, the epic of life would be an entirely different tale. And for 10 million years, at the heart of that tale stood a predator, an apex hunter that has been consistently overshadowed, underestimated, and lost in the long, deep shadow cast by its more famous successor. Its name is Allosaurus, and it is time to step out of that shadow and into the unrelenting Jurassic sun. To comprehend this animal, we cannot view it as a mere collection of fossilized bones. We must first understand the world that shaped it. The Late Jurassic was more than an era. It was a complete, self-contained biological system, an intricate web of guest chronicle spanning from roughly 163 to 145 million years ago, represents one of the most extraordinary explosions of vertebrate life ever recorded. The stage for this drama is a vast expanse of sediment known today as the Morrison Formation. To travel through the American West, through Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, is to drive across the roof of this buried world. The rock layers beneath the modern soil, those warm-toned bands of ochre, crimson, and violet cutting through canyon walls, are not just stone. They are the pages of a lost book, and embedded within them are the remains of one of the most spectacular ecosystems this planet has ever hosted. 150 million years ago, this region sat at a similar latitude, but its climate was a world away. By analyzing ancient soils, fossilized plants, and the subtle isotopic signatures locked within the rock, scientists have pieced together a portrait of a landscape governed by radical seasonal shifts. This was a world of feast and famine, of deluge and drought. During the long wet season, monsoonal rains would transform the landscape. Rivers, swollen with runoff, would burst their banks, flooding across immense alluvial plains. Vast, shallow lakes would materialize, shimmering under the hazy sky, and for a time, life would flourish in the abundance of water. This was the pulse of the Morrison, a rhythmic cycle of boom and bust that defined existence, and in doing so, forged the very nature of the creatures who called it home. A world painted in shades of emerald and deep shadow. Along the arteries of ancient waterways, dense gallery forests of conifers, titanic ancestors of today's araucaria trees reached for a Jurassic sun. Beneath their sprawling canopy, an undergrowth of tree ferns unfurled in a riot of green, creating a humid, primeval labyrinth. And standing watch over it all were the Gare Age. Along the riverbanks, thickets of horsetail plants, some growing several meters tall, crowded the water's edge, a living relic of a bygone botanical dynasty. This was the season of plenty, a verdant paradise teeming with life. But this paradise was a fleeting illusion, a promise built on water. For the wet season did not last forever. When the dry season came, it came with the fury of a tyrant. The sun became a relentless, baking force in a cloudless sky. Those mighty rivers, once carving their way through the landscape, shrank to sluggish trickles, their banks receding to expose cracked, thirsty earth. Vast lakes evaporated, leaving behind plains of salt and mud. the lush green surrendered, fading to brittle shades of brown and ochre. Across the floodplain, life, once dispersed, was now compressed. Animals of every kind were forced together, congregating in a tense and desperate truce around the last remaining water sources. These shrinking oases became theaters of both opportunity and catastrophe. This brutal seasonal rhythm, a relentless cycle of feast and famine, of flood and drought, was the engine that shaped everything. It dictated the migrations of the great herbivores, it governed the strategies of the hunters, and it forged the very nature of the apex predator that ruled this land. It shaped Allosaurus. To understand this creature, precision is paramount. What exactly was it? Allosaurus was a theropod dinosaur, a formidable member of the two-legged, primarily carnivorous lineage that would, in a distant future, give rise to birds. It belonged to a powerful clan called the Allosauroidea, one of the most dominant large predator groups of the entire Mesozoic era. It is crucial to note that Allosaurus is not, despite common misconception, a direct ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex. The two are separated by tens of millions of years, an eternity in evolutionary terms, and belong to entirely different branches of the theropod family tree. To think of Allosaurus as merely a primitive T-Rex is to misunderstand the very nature of evolution. It is akin to calling a wolf a primitive lion. Both are magnificent carnivores, both masters of their respective domains, but they arrived at their thrones by very different paths. The first chapter of its modern story was written in 1877, when the legendary paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh gave the genus its name, based on fragmentary material unearthed in Colorado. But the true, breathtaking scale of this animal would remain a secret buried in stone until the earth of Utah began to give up its dead. Extraordinary discoveries at Dinosaur National Monument, and later, at a place of unparalleled significance, the Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry, finally revealed the complete, spectacular beast. The Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry is more than just a fossil site. It is a paleontological crime scene, a mystery that has haunted scientists for decades. From this single location, more than 10,000 individual dinosaur bones have been recovered. And of all the creatures found here, Allosaurus accounts for roughly 70% of every specimen. 10,000 bones, the vast majority belonging to the apex predator. The question echoes through the halls of museums worldwide. Why did so many of these dominant hunters die in this one specific place? The leading hypothesis paints a grim and compelling picture: a predator trap. Imagine the landscape during the depths of the dry season. A sticky, treacherous mudflat surrounds a dwindling water source, one of the last in the region. A struggling herbivore, desperate for a drink, becomes mired in the muck. Its panic cries and the scent of its distress travel on the dry wind, an irresistible summons to any predator nearby. And Allosaurus, driven by the same hunger that shaped its species, arrives. It sees an easy meal. But as it ventures onto the mudflat, it too becomes ensnared by the clinging, inescapable mire. Its own struggles only serve to attract more of its kind, each drawn by the promise of a kill, and each in turn falling victim to the same lethal trap. In this mass grave, we find not just the story of a dinosaur's death, but the eternal unwritten law of the wild, that the line between the hunter and the hunted is as thin and treacherous as the mud of a dying world. In the heart of the Jurassic, a lethal illusion shimmered under a relentless sun. It was a source of water, a promise of life in the parched landscape of ancient North America. For desperate herbivores, driven by thirst during the long, dry season, it was a magnet, an irresistible pull toward salvation. But this oasis was a lie, a treacherous mire disguised as sanctuary. And where the herbivores, drawn by the scent of struggling prey, the sounds of distress, they came. Some of those predators, perhaps many of them, became mired themselves, lured in by the promise of an easy meal, only to meet the same suffocating fate as their victims. It is a scene of ancient tragedy, a tableau of predator and prey united in a slow, silent death.
And from this single catastrophic location, what we now call the Cleveland-Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, we have been granted an almost unprecedented window into the life of the Jurassic's apex hunter, Allosaurus. On the mud of 150 million years ago, a fully grown adult Allosaurus fragilis, the most common species, was an animal of formidable scale. From the tip of its snout to the end of its powerful balancing tail, it could reach lengths of 8 to 12 meters, that is roughly 26 to 39 feet of predatory perfection. It stood perhaps 4 to 5 meters tall at the hip, a wall of muscle and bone weighing somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 metric tons. And the fossil record hints that some exceptional individuals, perhaps belonging to the larger Allosaurus europaeus or the giant Allosaurus gimatsini, pushed far beyond even that. By the standards of its more famous successor, Tyrannosaurus rex, these numbers might seem modest. T-Rex was heavier, its skull more robust, its bite more powerful. But this comparison misses a critical truth. Allosaurus was not trying to be Tyrannosaurus. It was not a failed attempt at something better, an evolutionary rough draft. It was a supremely evolved, magnificently adapted predator, perfectly suited to its own time, its own ecosystem, its own prey. It was the master of the Jurassic world. And when you look at its anatomy with that understanding, everything changes. Begin with the skull. The skull of Allosaurus is a masterpiece of evolutional crime. Skull is long, narrow, and, crucially, lightweight. It is an architecture of air and bone, riddled with large openings called fenestrae. These were not signs of weakness. They were a brilliant solution to a biomechanical problem, removing all unnecessary weight while maintaining profound structural integrity. Above the eyes, it sported two distinctive bony ridges between individuals, perhaps used for display, for species recognition, a silent, colorful language we can no longer interpret. Its jaws were a conveying through flesh with terrifying efficiency. They curved backwards, a subtle but lethal feature, ensuring that anything caught in those jaws would only be pulled deeper toward the throat in venience, continuously replaced throughout the animal's life, a testament to a violent existence. But it is here, in the application of these weapons, that Allosaurus surprises us most. For years, paleontologists assumed that a predator's primary weapon was the sheer force of its bite. Yet the question that has captivated scientists, the question that challenges our very definition of a superpredator, is what happens when the evidence suggests something else entirely? What happens when the master hunter of an age does not kill with brute force, but with a technique more elegant, more complex, and perhaps even more terrifying? 150 million years have passed, a chasm of time so vast it defies human comprehension. The world that was is gone, buried under rock and dust, its stories fractured into a billion fossilized pieces. And among those pieces, a question persists, etched into the bones of giants. How did a predator, weighing a mere 2 tons, systematically hunt and kill animals that were 10, 20, even 30 times its own mass? How did Allosaurus, the different lizard, dominate an age of titans? The honest answer is a whisper from the abyss of deep time. We cannot know with certainty. Behavior does not mineralize. The cunning, the strategy, the social dynamics of a creature dead for millennia leave no direct trace. They are ghosts in the geological machine. But we are not without our guides. We have clues, tantalizing fragments of a lost reality. We have trackways, ghostly impressions in ancient mud now turned to stone that map out a creature's final journey. We have bite marks, the signature of violence, carved into the very bones of its victims, a record of the moment hunter met hunted. We have the elegant, unforgiving logic of biomechanics, allowing us to resurrect these animals in digital space, to test their skeletons against the laws of physics. And we have the echoes of their world in our own, the ecological analogs that show us how predators and prey still dance their lethal ballet today. When these threads are woven together, a picture begins to form. Incomplete, yes, but utterly compelling. One theory, the most debated and dramatic, is that of the pack. We imagine a coordinated assault, a group of Allosaurs, a tide of teeth and claws, overwhelming a colossal sauropod through sheer numbers. There is evidence for this kind of behavior in the broader theropod family tree, parallel trackways from other sites across the globe, showing multiple large carnivores moving in unison, a terrifying prospect. Yet for Allosaurus specifically, the jury remains in deliberation. Perhaps they were not true her by the promise of a monumental kill, a chaotic, opportunistic mob. But there is another, more chilling possibility. A hypothesis that paints the Allosaurus not as a pack hunter, but as something more patient, more methodical, an ambush predator of terrifying efficiency. This vision is supported by the creature's own anatomy. Its skull, large but surprisingly light, was not built to withstand the torsional stress of a prolonged struggle. Its bite force was remarkably weak, far less powerful than that of a modern crocodile. But it possessed two critical assets: a neck of immense muss with a hatchet. The hypothesis suggests a killing stroke not of crushing force, but of velocity and precision. A rapid, downward slam of the head, using the full power of the neck. For such a weapon to be effective, surprise is paramount. A prey animal that sees the attack coming will move, will turn, will defend itself. A slashing attack against a moving target is a gamble, but against one that is stationary, startled, or vulnerable, it is devastating. Imagine the scene: a dense gallery forest bordering a slow-moving Jurassic river. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation. Through the giant cycads and tree ferns, a juvenile Camarasaurus, already weighing several tons, has separated from its herd to drink. It lowers its long neck, momentarily unaware, and in the shadows, something waits. An Allosaurus, concealed by the foliage, a statue of patterned flesh and muscle. It waits with a patience that seems alien in an animal of its size, a stillness that belies the furnace of its metabolism. Then, the moment arrives. It erupts from its cover, not with the sustained open-field sprint of a cheetah. Its leg proportions suggest a creature built for powerful, short bursts, not marathons. It needed to be fast over 10 meters, not 1,000. It closes the distance in a few thunderous strides. The attack is a blur of calculated violence. The head swings down, a living axe, and the teeth shear through hide and muscle on the young sauropod's flank or neck. The damage is immense, severing arteries, causing massive hemorrhaging. And then, the most intelligent move of all. The Allosaurus withdraws. It pulls back, melting into the forest. Because to linger is to die. Even a juvenile sauropod, panicked and mortally wounded, is an engine of destruction. A single, desperate blow from its tail could shatter the predator's bones. So the Allosaurus does not engage in a battle. It has already won the war. Now it tracks the scent of blood on the wind, watching as the great animal stumbles, slows, and finally collapses under the weight of its own life, draining away into the Jurassic soil. This is not the roaring, monstrous clash of popular imagination. It is something quieter, more sinister, a display of intelligence, of energy conservation, of a predator that intimately understood the physics of its world and the vulnerabilities of its prey. Allosaurus did not rule its kingdom through brute force alone. It ruled through a sophisticated and terrifying calculus of risk and reward, a masterpiece of predatory evolution. In its shadow, we see that the laws of nature are not written by the strongest, but by the most effective. And in the silent testimony of its bones, we are reminded that every ecosystem, past and present, is a complex tapestry woven from threads of life and death, a balance of power that is as delicate as it is eternal. The Morrison Formation was not a tranquil garden. It was an arena, a crucible, forged by intense competition where life and death were played out on a colossal scale. To comprehend the reign of Allosaurus, one must first understand the landscape of fear it inhabited, a world teeming with rivals, scavengers, and formidable threats. Chief among them was Torvosaurus, a theropod of breathtaking power. This was no sleek hunter, but a heavyweight brawler,
a massive, robust predator that may have equaled or even exceeded Allosaurus in sheer bulk. Its forelimbs were disproportionately long and powerful, tipped with claws that could grapple and hold. Its teeth were not the delicate, slashing blades of its rival, but thick, bone-crushing pegs designed to grip and tear through flesh and sinew. When these two titans met, it was a clash of brutal strength against lethal agility. The dangers were not confined to the land. The waterways of the Morrison, the slow-moving rivers and murky pools, were the domain of other ancient killers. Assassins, their armored bodies submerged, waiting for any creature that wandered too close to the water's edge. A moment of thirst could be a final, fatal mistake. Even the herbivores were fortresses of flesh and bone. A large stegosaurus could weigh nearly 3 tons, its back a ridgeline of imposing plates. But its true defense was the thagomizer, the cluster of 4 bony spikes at the end of its muscular tail. This was no passive deterrent. It was a lethal weapon, swung with devastating force, capable of piercing hide and shattering bone. An attack on such a creature was a gamble of the highest order. In this violent world, Allosaurus did not dominate through brute force alone. It prevailed through something far more potent: adaptability. For 10 million years, it thrived in one of the most ecologically competitive environments the Mesozoic ever produced. This was a reign built not just on strength, but on an intelligence that allowed it to outthink its rivals and its... To truly grasp this, we must set aside the bones, the biomechanics, the cold, hard data, and for a moment, simply be there. Imagine standing on the floodplain 150 million years ago. The air itself is alien. It carries no scent of flowers. For angiosperms, the plants that would one day carpet the earth in color, are still tens of millions of years in the future. The world is a symphony of green, brown, and gold, but the greens are those of immense conifers, of sprawling cycads, and vast, unbroken seas of ferns. There is no grass. The soft blanket that covers our modern world would not evolve for another 80 million years. The forests are ancient, primordial, populated by species with no living relatives. And yet, some smells are hauntingly familiar. The sharp, clean resin of pine from the conifers, the deep vegetal scent of wet ferns after a sudden downpour, the mineral tang of river mud disturbed by the passing of a giant, and beneath it all, the faint, metallic scent of copper, the smell of blood. Dawn arrives with tropical speed. The sun rises not gently, but fast and hard, a searing orb in a pale sky. Within an hour of first light, the heat is already a physical presence. By midday, the floodplain becomes a brutal, shimmering expanse where the temperature climbs to dangerous heights. Smaller animals caught in the open must find shelter or perish. Life persists in every form. Dragonflies, not quite as massive as their carboniferous ancestors, but still extraordinary, cruise over the river's surface on wings of iridescent glass. Beetles, the size of a human thumb, cling to the bark of ancient tremative flies, and gnats cloud in dense, living swarms. The giants seem barely to notice, their hides too thick, their ancient nervous systems too simple to register the constant irritation. This was the world Allosaurus mastered, a world of staggering beauty and relentless cruelty. An entire ecosystem, intricate and perfectly balanced, that flourished for millions of years, convinced of its own permanence. It is a humbling reminder that every kingdom, no matter how mighty, is but a fleeting chapter in the immense, silent story of the earth. Beneath the dew-slicked fronds of ancient cycads, the world awakens. Small lizards, sphenodonts, living fossils even then, and relatives of the modern tuatara, dart through the underbrush. They emerge from their burrows to bask in the thin, early sun, their movements quick, ancient, and reptilian. In the shadows, the future is retreating. Early mammals, small, nervous creatures cloaked in fur, are vanishing into darkness after a long night of careful foraging. They are the survivors, the keepers of a promise that will not be fulfilled for another 85 million years. For now, their existence is predicated on a single vital skill, being invisible. But something else is here. Something that has no need for invisibility. Its eye moves, a vast, dark orb catching the first rays of dawn. Its rib cage, a cage of bone the size of a man, expands with a slow, deliberate rhythm. It is breathing, it is watching, it is waiting. In the nascent light of the Jurassic morning, the creature known as Allosaurus is a monument of alien flesh and bone. And as we gaze upon this titan, we must confront a question that paleontologists have only recently begun to explore with scientific rigor. The frustrating, humbling truth is that we do not know. We cannot know with certainty. The microscopic structures that produce color, the melanosomes, are fragile ghosts of biology. In the fossilized remains of feathered dinosaurs, they can sometimes leave a trace, a spectral fingerprint of ancient plumage. And yet, we are not entirely in the dark. We can reason from the iron laws of ecology. We can infer. An animal of this scale, with its rapid growth rates, was powered by a voracious internal furnace. It possessed a high metabolic rate, a constant driving hunger that demanded a staggering amount of fuel. This was not a cold, languid reptile. It was a dynamo of flesh and blood. And this simple biological fact dictated its entire existence, including, perhaps, its coloration. Was it camouflaged in mottled earth tones, allowing it to blend with rock and soil for a devastating ambush? Or did it wear stripes of shadow and light, breaking up its colossal outline amidst the fern prairies and conifer forests? The color of Allosaurus remains a canvas for our informed imagination, painted with the brush of ecological necessity. That same metabolic engine shaped a life of immense vulnerability. The young were, for years, caught in a perilous limbo. They were too small to challenge the colossal sauropods and armored stegosaurs that were the rightful prey of the adults. Yet they were far too large to be inconspicuous. A juvenile Allosaurus was a creature living in the shadow of giants, including its own kind. It almost certainly hunted different prey, occupying a distinct ecological role. It would have pursued fleet-footed ornithopods, targeted the young Titian, where even members of the same species were rivals, not kin. Of their beginnings, we know almost nothing directly. Not a single confirmed Allosaurus nest has ever been unearthed. But by studying their theropod relatives and their living descendants, birds, we can speculate with care. The eggs, almost certainly, were laid in simple nests scraped from the earth. But did the mother guard them? The energetic cost of parental care for an animal of this magnitude would have been enormous. Weeks or months of vigilance would mean weeks or months of not hunting, a potential death sentence for an organism burning so much fuel. It is entirely possible, even probable, that Allosaurus employed a different strategy, a gamble of sheer numbers. A female might have laid dozens of eggs, relying on camouflage and overwhelming odds to ensure that at least a few survived. The hatchlings would have entered a world that viewed them only as a meal, their first and most dangerous years spent evading not just other predators, but larger, cannibalistic Allosaurus. Those that survived this gauntlet, that learned to hunt and to fight, that evaded the jaws of their own species, eventually grew into the apex predators of their age. Bone growth data suggests a maximum lifespan of perhaps 28 years, a brief, violent reign for such a dominant creature. This life history, rapid growth, a high-octane metabolism, and a relatively short life, made Allosaurus a high-turnover predator. Its populations were resilient, capable of recovering from environmental setbacks with speed. It was a strategy that defined an epoch. For 10 million years, it worked with breathtaking efficiency. Allosaurus was not merely a creature within its ecosystem, it was the ecosystem's driving force, the sculptor of evolution for every animal that lived in its. Then, 145 million years ago, the Jurassic ended.
the world changed. The forest shifted, the prey moved on, and the long reign of Allosaurus came to its inevitable close. Its dominance, which must have seemed so absolute, so permanent, was fleeting on the grand scale of geological time. All that is left is bone, turned to stone, a silent testament to a world ruled by a magnificent, terrible hunger.
The end of an era rarely arrives with a thunderclap. For the world of Allosaurus, there was no cataclysmic impact, no single event to mark its passing. Instead, the Morrison ecosystem, a vast floodplain that had teemed with giants for millions of years, began to fray at the edges. It was a slow, grinding dissolution, written in the language of shifting climates, retreating seas, and evolving flora. The world did not break, it simply faded into something new. But the apex predator of this fading world did not vanish with it. The bloodline of Allosaurus was not so easily extinguished. It persisted, crossing the threshold from the Jurassic into the Cretaceous, a ghost lineage that would be reforged in the fires of a new age. From this ancestral stock arose the Carcharodontosaurs, the shark-toothed lizard, the true heirs to the Allosaurid throne, titans of flesh and bone that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, the mighty Tyrannosaurus in sheer scale. The rise of the Tyrannosaurs in North America was not a coup. They did not overthrow a reigning dynasty. Their ascent was a story told by time, by geography, by the slow, inexorable separation of the world's continents. As the land masses fractured and drifted apart, new evolutionary arenas were formed, isolating populations and allowing different predatory dynasties to flourish. The Tyrannosaurs did not inherit the mantle of Allosaurus. They forged their own on a continent transformed. Today, Allosaurus is immortalized as the state fossil of Utah, a testament to the staggering wealth of remains unearthed from that ancient landscape. It was never a lesser predator, never an early draft for a later, greater design. It was a masterpiece of predatory evolution, perfectly adapted for the world it inhabited. And it succeeded, profoundly, for an astonishing 10 million years. To place this reign in perspective, modern humans have existed for a mere 300,000 years. The dynasty of Allosaurus outlasted our own fleeting existence by a factor of more than 33. The science of this animal is far from a closed book. Beneath the red-banded canyon walls and the prairie soils of the American West, secrets are still being unlocked. Each year, new bones emerge from the earth, new pathologies that speak of brutal lives, new clues to behavior encoded in ancient calcium. Somewhere, perhaps at this very moment, a skull is waiting. A complete skeleton, an animal that hunted and fought and died 150 million years ago, lies preserved in stone, ready to tell us something we have not yet imagined. The Jurassic is gone, but it is not silent. It is simply listening, waiting, just as its greatest hunter always did.